Dude, never did it.
Welcome back to Never Did It, where Jake Ziegler and myself, Brad Garoon, talk about movies that we never that we never have seen before. We had, as a refresher, Jake and I have assigned one movie to each other that we'd never seen before from the past 100 years, starting in 1923 and going all the way up to 2022. And this year, we are doing 2015. Jake, do you want to talk about our U.S. release rule so that people know why we're doing a 2014 movie in 2015?
Oh yes, definitely. We're kind of adopting the release date where a movie came out in the United States because that's where we're both based, and we would not have even had an opportunity to see any of these films unless maybe you go to some of the higher end film festivals and things like that. So we've opted to use the United States release dates just to keep everything kind of uniform and. It would be so that it belongs to a year in which we could have actually seen it.
So we can start by talking about The Look of Silence. I did not see this in 2015. I assume you did because it was an Oscar movie.
Yes, I did, and I had seen, of course, The Act of Killing. So the follow up was very interesting. I mean, didn't have to hear much about it to be interested in that.
Do you want to talk a bit about your interest in the Oscars or obsession with the Oscars before we jump into this movie and why it's so important for you to see Oscar movies?
Yeah, I do. I am obsessed with the Oscars, but I think I'm obsessed with them in a way that maybe other people aren't. I don't know, that probably sounds super pretentious, but I'm just obsessed with them. Just like them existing, like I like knowing who was nominated. I like seeking out some of those movies that I didn't see or maybe wouldn't have seen. That helped me out a lot when I was first starting to watch movies in the early to mid '90s. Like, okay, what's up for the Oscar this year? It's like, oh, Pulp Fiction. I want to see that. Oh, Quiz shows up for Best Picture. I want to see that. And so I started seeing some of these good movies, and then you start with those movies, and that always leads you down a path to different movies. So that's just kind of how I started doing it. And then I'm also a little OCD about things, so I like to check things off of a list. And the Oscar nominees every year, there's a certain number of films, and I can go down and check them off the list, and that's just super satisfying.
So I'm gonna defend you a little bit against your own accusation of being pretentious. I don't think what you do is pretentious at all. It's very meticulous, the way that you're obsessed with the Oscars. And for anyone listening who's curious, the list on Letterboxd, the official list on Letterboxd of all of the movies that have ever been nominated for Best Picture or any Oscar ever. Which one is it?
And I think it was the winners of Best Picture.
Okay, so that list is Jake's list. When you click on that list, if you are a Letterboxd Pro and you have access to stats and you want to see how complete your Best Picture winner list is, when you click on that, that is Jake's list. You will see his name in the corner of your screen. So that's pretty neat. That's Jake's cool little claim to fame on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I hang on to that, and I don't get. I want to say too, like I don't get like really upset or annoyed by the Oscars, even when the quote wrong film wins. It's like that's okay. I just want it to be an entertaining show, and I'm really almost more interested in the nominations than who actually wins, because with the nominations you get some surprises, and then usually by the time you actually get to the Oscar ceremony, there's very few surprises in the winners by that point. So I almost kind of like the nominations a little more.
For sure. I'm a big fan of the best original screenplay award, just because I don't know why. It just seems like that's the cool kids category.
That's where Being John Malkovich made it. So yeah.
That's a fun movie. So this movie, the we mentioned in the last episode, The Act of Killing was Joshua Oppenheimer's big breakout documentary about killers in Indonesia during the Indonesian communist purge. That's probably a really insensitive way of talking about what happened there in 1965 or 1966. His follow-up here is called The Look of Silence. You assigned it to me, so why don't you tell me why you picked it for me to watch and what it's about?
It's a kind of a continuation of the Act of Killing, which I thought was a really important, and really different and unique documentary where there's really almost nothing like it, that I've seen. And just knowing that The Look of Silence was a follow up to that, I mean, they go well together. The second film, really builds on what you've seen in the first movie, and I just thought if you were going to do one of them, it makes sense really to do both of them and do them close together as well, just because they really inform each other.
For sure. So I took more than a week between watching these two movies because after watching The Act of Killing, I was just not in the mood for this kind of movie at all. Like we mentioned in the last episode, The Act of Killing is an incredibly tough hang. Um, and this movie, okay, I learned that I watched the director's cut of The Act of Killing. I learned that by after I watched The Look of Silence, watching interviews with Joshua Oppenheimer and a few other people where they mentioned that that was the director's cut. So, okay, that was a goof because where I felt like The Act of Killing was an amazing movie, if a little overlong, the Look of Silence was like a kind of a perfect documentary. It was no extra space. It's funny, I made Jake, or asked Jake. I can't make him do anything. I asked Jake to watch a Vice interview with Errol Morris and Werner Herzog where they talked about The Act of Killing. And in it, Werner Herzog talked about how the what did he call, not absurdity? What was the surrealist? There are parts of The Act of Killing where Oppenheimer is helping these thugs make a movie about the killings, and also there are these surreal scenes of cross-dressing and just beautiful vistas and crazy, really interesting looking structures that you don't see anywhere else in the world, like a giant fish and women coming out of the giant fish. But this giant fish building really exists in front of a beautiful lake and things, a river maybe. Those are amazing shots, and they sort of put you they make you more uneasy when you think about the content that's in The Act of Killing. There's nothing like that in The Look of Silence. The juxtaposition of the killers who are interviewed again is an I don't remember if optometrist or ophthalmologist is the name for what this guy does. It's one or the other. He's a middle-aged man, not too much older than Jake and I, who was born just after the killings, whose brother was killed during the massacre. And he, with Josh Oppenheimer's help, is able to interview some of the killers, including one of the men who actually killed his brother, under the guise of visiting them to give them new glasses, to test them for new glasses. And these conversations, as the movie goes on, become more and more intense as he starts to feel more comfortable revealing more about who he is and his relationship to his brother, and how he feels that the killers have no remorse. And you can hear in Josh Oppenheimer's voice off screen, which is barely heard in The Act of Killing, by the way, but you can hear his voice in this one sound. He tries to make the peace more with the interview subjects, or between the interview subjects, because he knows that it is life and death dangerous for this middle-aged man to be asking these questions, to be confronting these people in this way. It's terrifying, some of these scenes. And I came away thinking that this might be the most important movie I've ever seen from a Jewish filmmaker, from a Jewish perspective. So Jake and I are both Jewish, FYI. But I just think it's important as a Jewish filmmaker that Oppenheimer did this, because such a big part of Jewish identity in the 20th and 21st century is informed by our reaction to the Holocaust. And for him to be exposing this Western-backed genocide that most people in the West don't know about. Now, I can't say that with any confidence, except that I did not know about this before I saw these. And I think that you and I are two relatively well-educated people, and curious people who want to be informed about these kinds of things. So I didn't know, like, you didn't know about this beforehand. I didn't know about this beforehand. I came away thinking this is the greatest thing that a Jewish filmmaker can do, is make a movie like this. And not just because the subject matter is important, but because he did it in the most arresting way. I mean, you can't take your eye off the screen. You're watching a scary moment. And I felt very relieved when I listened to an interview with him after the fact, that when Oppenheimer goes to there's one part where he visits a governor. I think he's a governor or some kind of government official, and confront him. And this is after he's already been threatened by one of the people that he visits. The guy asks where he's from, and he won't tell him. But it was good to know that when they went to visit some of the more important people who were perpetrators of this massacre and now are in the government, that Oppenheimer had the middle-aged man's family at the airport ready to flee the country if something went wrong. So it feels as though he did the responsible thing, or as responsible a thing as he could have done, while helping this person confront these people that he wanted to confront, while at the same time you're learning a lot about his 104-year-old father who can't see and can barely hear, and his maybe 100-year-old mother who doesn't seem to know how old she is because she refuses to celebrate birthdays. And you see her just sorrow and anguish over what the murder of her son did to her, and how having her other son, who she had after her first son died, that's why she's so much older than him, how she's so afraid of what he's doing in this film, but he's determined. It's clearly not Oppenheimer pressuring him to do this. He's determined to do this on his own. Anyway, so I'm rambling, but this blew me away.
It's got everything that a good like thriller film would have. There's drama to it. There's a suspense to it. And there's just all kind of. It's just a profoundly engaging, like almost like in some of the Errol Morris movies where you feel like you're kind of just watching it there with them, and it's startling, really.
Yeah, so I mentioned this Errol Morris and Werner Herzog interview I had to watch. A couple things struck you about that interview. Tell me about that.
I did, yeah. I wish I could remember the exact quote. I was in my office watching the video, and I literally wrote it down on a sticky note, and then I left the sticky note there. But I wanted so badly to remember it. He's talking about the quote is basically that all the facts in the world don't necessarily equal a truth. Just meaning that if you made a film of someone maybe reading the telephone book, that's all very factual information. It's 100% fact. There's their name and how to spell it and the address and the phone number, but there's no bigger truth to that. It's just a series of facts. And documentary film can be more than that. And I thought that was a really cool thing. I wish I could remember exactly how he said it, and I wish I could do his voice because he's got a great voice, but I can't. I just can't.
And everyone tries, and it's never that good. So
It's a really difficult one to pull off, I think. But then also, Errol Morris had a quote. He said he was arguing with a film critic who didn't like the film, didn't like, remember this is back to the first film, The Act of Killing, didn't like it, said he somehow knew less about the subject than he did before coming into the movie. And Errol Morris told me, he said, whatever documentary is, it's not adult education, meaning it's not their responsibility to teach you about it. It's their responsibility to show you something and that could interest you about it, and find an angle and find something that you can really dive into and really do something with. It's not it's not meant to be a Wikipedia page.
Exactly. That being said, if you watch these movies and you are not driven to have a Wikipedia page up either while you're watching it or after it's over, I would be shocked, because I watched the second half of The Look of Silence in my office where I have two screens, and I had a Wikipedia page up about the Pancasila youth, who I remembered from the first film, about what happened in this movie. Is this guy who was this main subject of The Look of Silence, is he okay? I couldn't find a definitive answer, but I bet it's out there. And I know it's out there because I was able to find out who of these old murderers have died since the movie came out, which was at least a little bit cathartic. That reminds me of a scene in The Look of Silence that I don't want this podcast to end without us talking about.
Okay.
And it's when I keep forgetting this guy's name. It was like Abi or something like that. He goes to visit one of these old killers, and this man is being interviewed with his daughter because he's senile and he can't quite keep his thoughts straight. And the daughter is clearly very proud of her dad, but her dad brings up a story that another killer had said earlier in the film, where the killers drank the blood of their victims because they were sure that if they killed enough people but didn't drink the blood of their victims, it would drive them insane. And the example they used was a guy who killed so many people that he started taking the Muslim call to prayer in a tree, and that everyone who drank the blood didn't lose their minds. So the dad in front of his daughter mentions that he drank the blood of his victims. And you can see when he says it, the daughter's eyes open wide, but she stays very still, but her eyes open very wide. And then the dad sort of goes into like a senile haze, and she starts talking to our protagonist, for lack of a better word, about how that was the first time she'd ever heard that, and how she's like shocked at how sadistic her father was. And she asks him for forgiveness. She asks this young man for forgiveness. And he's very quick to forgive her and say that your father being a murderer has nothing to do with you. They hug. And then because this woman asks for forgiveness, he actually shakes the hand of this old man because he sees that he's gone and he feels a catharsis. And it's totally different from how he acts with all these other men he met who not only are remorseless, they mostly say they're not to blame. And it blows my mind. And then what's so unfortunate is in the very next interview, one of the murderers, the actual murderers of his brother, has died. So he goes to visit that person's family. And they all pretend they don't know anything, that they've never heard about this murder, and they don't know anything about it, and they didn't know that their dad/husband had ever killed anyone. Meanwhile, there's video footage of the wife standing next to the man from 7 years ago when Oppenheimer was first there, where he's bragging about the murders, how he made a picture book about it, and he's showing the picture book of the murders. It's disgusting. She leaves, her sons get furious, but then she comes back and apologizes. And it's just very heavy to watch people confronted by these crimes. And I think it also has a wonderful parallel to what's going on in America now when it comes to CRT. We are further removed chronologically from slavery than these people are from this genocide. And yet we have people who are adamantly opposed to teaching their children anything about the crimes perpetrated against black slaves in the United States. And it is crazy. And the same exact talking points that are being used by the perpetrators of the genocide in Indonesia, that leave it alone or it'll cause divisions, you're causing problems, you're making things worse, are the same exact things that these anti-CRT people say now in the United States. It's wild. Everyone should see this movie. 5 stars.
Full 5, and I give full 5 to both of them. I still don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Like, we'll get to the Thin Blue Line at some point, and there's a lot of like recreation in that, but it's all, it's actors playing the part. It's not like the real people, and that's
right.
That's what really sets Act of Killing and Look of Silence apart. Like, you could, I don't know how you could act that. I don't know how anybody who wasn't the actual person could do it.
So I don't think that there is a connection between The Look of Silence and Legend. I didn't look for one. I just assumed there wasn't one. But I told Jake to watch the 2015 Tom Hardy film Legend. So this movie was directed by Brian Helgeland, who is also the director of movies I quite liked, like A Knight's Tale and 42, which is solid. I'm sure, Jake, you liked it because it's baseball.
Yep, I liked it.
And Payback, which I think is the fun Mel Gibson movie.
I've actually never seen that one.
It's a blast. And I don't like Mel Gibson, but I do like this movie.
Yeah. It's okay. I love Maverick. I can't help it.
Oh, right. Sure. I haven't seen that since I was a kid. So Legend is notable because it stars Tom Hardy in dual roles as gangster twins, Ronald and Reginald Cray. And they run part of London. And the movie is basically just about their conflicts with each other and their conflicts with everyone around them. And one of them is a lot more savvy than the other. And mainly Ronald, I think it's Ronald is the more with it one, right?
No, Reggie is.
Oh, so Reg, and Reg's issues with his family and his wife and things like that. So I wanted Jake to watch this because I kind of hated it, and I know a lot of people who really liked it. And I think that what Tom Hardy was doing was really interesting. He did have a completely different take on both brothers, which I thought was cool. And I normally think Tom Hardy is weirdly humorless in a lot of his movies, but he seemed to be having fun doing this. But I thought this movie was kind of dooky, and I was curious what you thought of it.
Well, I liked it. Definitely didn't love it. I mean, right off the bat, it's 20 minutes too long. I think it was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. Like, no need for that. As far as gangster stories go, it hits a lot of familiar beats. You start slow, build your way up, and then you're a bigger kingpin. Your wife is threatening to leave you, but then you get her to promise to stay, and then some things go wrong, and yet, et cetera, et cetera. It hits a lot of those same beats. But Tom Hardy, I don't know. I don't see the humorless thing with him. Maybe it's because I recently rewatched Inception, and he seems to be having a blast in that movie.
So that's why I say weirdly, because that was my first exposure to him, and he's so much fun in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then in every single movie since then. Does he smile? I don't know. I mean, thank God for Venom. Not movies I like, but movies he's clearly like just goofing off in. Because before that, I was like, this guy doesn't like acting.
And that's the other one I was thinking of was Venom 2, which by all accounts is a bad movie and I should not have enjoyed, but he really just won me over. Just by, I mean, he's just talking to himself for the whole movie, so it's a lot like Legend in the fact that there's just two Tom Hardys talking to each other, and yeah, I kind of liked it. But I mean, yeah, Legend was okay.
So this movie reminded me a lot of The General in that it was a movie about English
Oh, but I love the General.
gangsters. Yeah, The General's way better.
Yeah,
But The General doesn't have like needless narration from the wife character.
yeah,
This is how you okay, so in general, I think we can all agree that narration is often a crutch in a movie. But sometimes it can be used to very humorous effect or just like good narrative effect. It's called narration. It's supposed to help with the narrative. But you know it's bad when the narrator tells you things that you could have figured out on your own by watching the movie. You don't need it at all in this. I think they did it so we would feel more attached to the wife character, and I love that actress. I forget her name,
Emily Browning.
but she's great. She was like in Lemony Snicket, I think. What's her name?
Emily Browning.
Right. She does the role well. She's inherently, I think, pretty sympathetic. I didn't need to spend more time with hearing her voice saying things that were pointless. But I guess like for the cool Tom Hardy performance, it's worth checking out, especially if you're a Tom Hardy fan. There's a neat, I wouldn't call it a cameo. He's in a lot of the movie, but a neat turn by, what's his name? The Rocket Man.
Taron Egerton. Yeah, I did not know he was in it. I got so excited when I saw him.
Yeah, he does great as one of the brothers' lovers. Yeah, so that bit of it's neat. But when I finished watching that movie, I called my buddy Mike, who recommended it to me, and I was like, "I'm mad at you, man. That was a waste of my time. I did not care for that at all."
I did. Well, I watched, it was a lazy Sunday afternoon, turned it on the Netflix, barely put any effort into it, and I got enough out of the Tom Hardy performances where I would say that I liked the movie, but it hasn't occupied a lot of my headspace, since it was over. But I did like how he played the two different brothers a lot, even like the way they looked different. Like the one brother kind of had an underbite, even so like they really, like they really kind of went all the way with that, and I thought that was cool. So, yeah, not a wasted afternoon, but not one I'll probably revisit.
It's interesting you say that because it's not just the underbite. He kind of makes Ronald feel bigger and more hulking and menacing because he's more dangerous.
Right.
It's Reg who kills the guy. Spoiler alert, it's Reg who kills the guy at the party, right?
Yeah, stabs the guy like 50 times.
Right.
That was difficult to watch, actually. Like, I don't know, I'd rather see a guy get shot 50 times than stabbed 50 times. It just kept going.
Yeah, it's really visceral. I think this is the first time. Yeah, it is. So this is the second episode that we're releasing, but it's not the second episode that we've recorded. But this is the first time I have not rewatched a movie that I assigned to you in preparation. I was just like, you know what? I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one's enough with this one.
And it is appropriate that it's on Netflix because it feels like a Netflix level movie.
Yeah, that feels right.
So this one gets 2.5 stars for me.
I actually went 3.5. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably more of a 3, but
I don't want to yuck your yum. I don't want to like make you like things less.
3.25. It's a 3.25 star movie.
If only Letterboxd let us do what we wanted to do.
Ah, jeez.
Okay. Well, so that's about it for this one. Didn't have too much to say about Legend. Definitely see The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence. Thanks for taking me back to 2015, Jake.
It was a pleasure.